This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 5 killed as UN warns on humanitarian situation in Mozambique. Government fears spread of insecurity in Tunisia if situation in Libya persists. And WHO halts Ebola intervention in DR Congo affected areas due to insecurity. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Rama joins me with a sneak peek of what's ahead in business news.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Nigeria plans to double its oil production and triple refining capacity by 2025. We'll explore how. And we'll also look at South Africa's long-awaited provisional report about the cost of data in Africa's most industrialized economy. Details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Kenneth.
Thank you, Rama. Let's begin in Mozambique, where the United Nations is now warning of a dire humanitarian situation as the country reels from the Cyclone Kenneth, which made a landfall on Thursday evening. So far, 5 people have died across the region as a result of the tropical storm. As Amy McConaughey reports, the affected countries are Mozambique, Comoros Islands and Tanzania.
As Cyclone Kenneth swept through the eastern African coast, it left behind a trail of death and destruction. 3 people were killed in the Comoros Islands, and 1 each in northern Mozambique and Tanzania's Pemba Islands, respectively. However, United Nations is worried about the developing humanitarian situation in Mozambique.
It made landfall in a fairly rural region, so unlike Idai, which hit Beira, which was densely populated, Kenneth made landfall in a fairly rural area. But even so, it was an extremely dangerous system. The forecasts, and these are based on models, computer models, warned of a storm surge, and quite often it's the water which kills people, warned of a storm surge of between 3 to 5 meters above sea level. We don't have figures yet on what the actual, the height of those waves were, but these were the warnings.
The disaster comes only 6 weeks after Cyclone Idai devastated central Mozambique, killing more than 600 people, unleashing a cholera epidemic, wiping out crops in the country's bread baskets, forcing 1 million people to rely on food assistance to survive, and causing massive destruction of homes, schools and infrastructure in one of the world's poorest countries.
Heavy rains continue pounding the affected regions, while experts warn that this might last for days. According to the United Nations, the resulting floods could make an already dire situation even worse.
There will be an urgent need for shelter, clean water, sanitation and hygiene kits, food and non-food items, power generation and telecommunication equipment. Cyclone Kenneth may require a major new humanitarian operation at the same time that the ongoing Cyclone Idai response targeting 3 million people in 3 countries remain critically underfunded.
The World Food Programme has announced an emergency mission. The Mozambican government said over 30,000 people have been evacuated from the affected areas. Amy McConaughey, CGTN.
CGTN's Daniel Kijo joins us for an update on this story. Daniel, at least 5 people have died in the region as Cyclone Kenneth makes landfall in Mozambique. What's the latest on that, and also the damage assessment in Mozambique and the region?
Hello. Reports from the latest reports from the Mozambique government have not been released, but we know that a lot of homes have been destroyed in the wake of Cyclone Kenneth. We know that experts say flash floodings are expected in the coming days because of a lot of the inland rivers that have collected water and might break their banks. So it is a time in which the country braces itself a couple of weeks out after Cyclone Idai destroyed much of parts of Zimbabwe. Now it is now going to be a collective effort between not just Mozambique but also neighboring countries to come together, just like they did with Idai, to support the country. There will be a need for food, a need for medicines, essential medicines, a need for shelter. So a lot of international communities are coming together. We know the Red Cross is there and are preparing, but for sure it will need to be a very collective effort from these countries, neighboring countries.
All right, so how about Mozambique, Daniel? How has the Mozambican and Tanzanian governments prepared to mitigate the coming damage from the flooding?
A few weeks ago, Cyclone Idai had caused a big strain on the Mozambique government, and they're still trying to recover from that. Now, the question is now, with the situation that exists, will the governments be able to prepare for yet another humanitarian crisis? The Mozambique government has confirmed that it's moved people from parts of that are in the wake of the expected flooding, but still these people need to be in shelters, they need to eat, and need to be able to get treatment if they're in trouble. We know that last time the Tanzanian government did reach out to the Mozambique government. It sent food, it sent essential medicines. So we're looking to hear from Tanzanian government and the Mozambique government in the next coming hours.
All right, Daniel Kijo live for us there in Dar es Salaam. Many thanks. Now let's cross over to Sudan, where thousands of Sudanese protesters have massed outside the army complex in central Khartoum. The demonstrators are demanding that the military council hand over power to a civilian administration. The 10-member council has so far resisted giving up Sudan's leadership. 3 of its members resigned on Wednesday, triggering jubilation among the protesters. Protest leaders have held several rounds of talks with the council. The two sides have agreed to set up a joint committee to chart the way forward. Protests have continued for the 10th Friday in Algeria. Demonstrators gathered outside the main post office in the country's capital, Algiers, chanting slogans and waving flags and banners. They are demanding the nation's ruling elite step down. They also want to see corrupt officials prosecuted. Earlier this month, President Abdelaziz Bouteflika resigned after 2 decades in power due to military pressure and a wave of protests. Some of those close to him, including wealthy businessmen, were arrested this week as part of an anti-graft probe. The Tunisian president has discussed with the country's premier, parliament speaker and members of the government the impact of the armed conflict in Libya on the security situation in Tunisia. Tunisian authorities fear the spread of insecurity in the country could be on the rise if the Libyan crisis persists.
Tunisian President Beji Qaid Essebsi chaired a National Security Council in Carthage Palace. The meeting shed light on the situation in Libya.
The security situation is unstable in Libya and the whole region. It is clear that the crisis will escalate in the coming days.
The head of state called for vigilance on the border regions with Libya. Thousands of Libyans have entered Tunisia to flee the conflict.
Tunisia is part of this region. We are following closely the developments. All security forces are on alert to face any potential threat.
Foreign Minister Khmeiz Jinawi gave the head of state an overview of his meeting with President of the High Council of State of Libya and the content of a telephone talks with Libyan army leader Khalifa Haftar, Libyan Foreign Minister and UN envoy to Libya.
We need to endeavor to find a consensual platform between the various Libyan factions fighting in Tripoli and other Libyan regions. Together and under the umbrella of the United Nations, we can set up mechanisms to help settle conflicts between Libyans without resorting to force and weapon use.
The Tunisian presidency has reiterated its position against the military escalation in Libya and called on the international community to redouble efforts to urge the various Libyan protagonists to stop fighting immediately. According to the ministries of the Interior and Defense, thousands of soldiers, National Guards, policemen and customs agents have been deployed near the border crossings of Ras Jdir and Hiba in the cities of Bengirdan and Tatawin. Authorities have called for vigilance following the escalation of the crisis in Libya. Abdel Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The second summit for the Belt and Road Initiative has been taking place in Beijing this week. The Chinese initiative is not only about economic cooperation, but also a means to bring people from different nations together. Working towards this goal is Salima, a Chinese businessman living in Egypt. Ma is also a 2018 Big Ben Awards winner for the Global Outstanding Young Persons Prize. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has the interview.
Saleh Ma has been living in Egypt since 2000. He is married and has 2 children. Ma owns several businesses, such as granite and shoe factories. But now he devotes his full time to his media application company in Cairo.
Why did you choose Egypt first, and how did you start your business here in Egypt?
I first came as a university student, but I worked as a translator during my studies. I then started to import goods from China and sell them here. I saw a lot of potential in Egypt, so I told my parents that I would stay in Egypt once I finished my university. From importing products, I saved money and bought a machine from China and opened a small granite workshop and shoe factory. And from there, my business grew.
What are the challenges you faced when your business here in Egypt, and how did you try to overcome these challenges?
My first challenge living here was language. I learnt Arabic but didn't understand the Egyptian dialect, and after some time I had to learn the Egyptian way so that people could understand me. The second challenge in business was in 2013 when I had a new foam factory, but I faced dollar shortage issues after the devaluation of the Egyptian pound. In 2016, I sold the factory and I established this startup in 2017 for applications.
How did your family settle here in Egypt, and how can they be able to work with Egyptians or have good relations with Egyptians?
I am married to a Chinese woman and we have 2 little girls. One of them, Kausar, was born in Egypt, but now she's back in China for high school. One of the problems when settling down was the language and communication at the beginning. Another problem was that I had to leave my wife at home for long periods because of my work outside Cairo, but my Egyptian neighbors and friends took her in and helped her settle down and get used to the Egyptian living. We never felt alone.
The Chinese expats, how are they living here in Egypt, and how can you communicate with the Egyptians?
There are many Chinese in Egypt, and more are arriving through tourism. When the Chinese come to Egypt and meet with Egyptians, they discover how similar we are, and we get on very well. Maybe because of the long history and deep-rooted culture of both civilizations. It's easy to make friends here. Me and most Chinese expats have a lot of friends in Egypt. Even people I haven't met for a long time. They call me every once in a while to ask about me. There is a strong bond between us and Egyptians.
Even as the Belt and Road Initiative Forum is taking place thousands of miles away, the impact is felt globally. In South Africa, the Chinese Embassy, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, and the Human Science Research Council held a seminar on the initiative's impact. The seminar provided an opportunity for South African government, researchers, media, and the public to better understand the Belt and Road Initiative and the progress being made in connecting BRI with the development agenda of South Africa and Africa as a whole. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
South Africa's Standard Chartered Bank says the Belt and Road Initiative is presently the most ambitious and far-reaching project of its kind in the world. It's a message that has been echoed in this seminar. The seminar provided an opportunity to understand how the initiative will benefit all countries along the routes, contributing to global economic and social development.
The golden rules for the Belt and Road Initiative is 3 together. That is, planning together, build together, and share together. The fundamental goal is to achieve win-win cooperation for common development through building 5 connectivities in policy, infrastructure, trade, finance, and people-to-people exchanges.
The Belt and Road Initiative is a China-led strategy to strengthen global trade links across the world, in particular between Asia, Africa and Europe, with investment in an array of large-scale infrastructure projects along these two land and sea corridors.
The Belt and Road Initiative reminds me very much of what started out as a slow goods train, heavily laden, but today it is one of China's speeding trains that's moving at a remarkable pace. And either you get onto this train and become part of the ride and become part of the benefit, or you will be left behind.
China's general emphasis on infrastructure development has received positive endorsement of African leaders.
Many economists say the Belt and Road Initiative will not only boost trade relations between South Africa and China, but will also be beneficial for the relations between China and the rest of the continent.
The Chinese government calls the Belt and Road Initiative a bid to enhance regional connectivity and embrace a brighter future.
Judging from the benefits in other regions of the world, South Africa stands to benefit immensely if we are to join and serve as the BRI pilot nation on the African continent. At a national level, it will help create a new developmental paradigm that in turn will help growth in the region and the entire continent.
The Belt and Road Initiative has made significant headway in the past few years and has gained support from many countries and international organizations. You listen to Mela for CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
Well, South Sudan is part of East Africa SGR railway project linking 5 countries. It's the most ambitious project by China in 100 years. CGTN's Beatrice Marshall sat down with John Duku, who is South Sudan's ambassador to China, to find out more about the initiative.
Ambassador Duku, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with the state of the standard gauge railway, East Africa's most ambitious railway, which will link 5 countries within the East African region, starting from the route of the Maritime Silk Road in Mombasa. What is the progress of that railway?
For South Sudan, who is a member of the East African community and also part of the Northern Corridor, we are part of this standard gauge rail. Now, this railway process started from Mombasa. It's now reached Naivasha. Hopefully, we'll go to Uganda, from Uganda, and then cross to South Sudan. Why is it important for us? It fits very well within the President Xi Jinping vision of Belt and Road. Because Belt and Road is a silk road, and it is so important for us that we have this railway. South Sudan is a landlocked country. We have no other source of importing our goods except through Mombasa. Now, the cost of transportation are very high. If you look at the containers on the trucks and then container on the rail, container and rail are more cheaper. So we want this project to be finished yesterday. But of course, there are processes going on.
There are a number of African leaders attending the Belt and Road Initiative summit here in Beijing. What is the sentiment of the continent when it comes to the Belt and Road Initiative?
We want to engage China, Beatrice. We want to engage China to be part of future of Africa. China realized that it is a very big economy. It continues to expand. But it needs to have raw material. It has a technology. Now, when Xi Jinping talk about a community, they build a community of shared value on the basis of win-win. What are these win-win? We, for example, as African countries, we have abundant raw material. This raw material remain untapped. China have technology. It does not have the raw material. So let us share benefit of Chinese technology and then have the raw material. Then how do you get it? Unless you have this Silk Road.
37 African countries have so far signed Belt and Road Initiative agreements with China. You're talking about the African leaders invited here should echo the sentiments of the continent. What is the continent's sentiment?
We have to learn from China. How do they move over 1.4 billion people from poverty to where it is now? And the answer from my little research I have here is, the answer is infrastructure. China invests on infrastructure. So our African leaders who are here, who have signed Belt and Road initiatives, who are representing the rest of us who are here. This should be on top of the table. Let them support. We need China to put resources to help us.
Kenya is an important member of the Belt and Road Initiative as it acts as a strategic link on the maritime Silk Road between Asia and Africa. The country's new standard gauge railway, a massive infrastructure project, was made possible through the BRI. Our senior correspondent Tian Wei sat down with the country's Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs and International Trade and got her perspectives on the partnership. Take a listen.
You know, it was very insightful to listen this morning to the president at the opening session. And I think one of the biggest points made was about alignment of the vision of the BRI and the regional and national plans of action.
Yes.
Okay? Now, the first thing around this is the whole idea about connectivity, whether it is infrastructure connectivity, ICT, whether it's people to people, whether, name it.
Now I understand your president and the Chinese president have been upgrading the bilateral relations. But next step, how is it going to correlate with what your president has proposed as Vision 2030 and the 4 strategic points? How would that work?
This speaks to us directly, because when you talk about Vision 2030, it is literally about a development that is inclusive, that is participatory, that improves people's quality of life. This is what it is about. And so there is a perfect alignment between the visioning in the BRI and our own national vision. Now, from Vision 2030, it has been cascaded down to the short and medium term plans. Now, within this current administration, we are focusing on the big 4. A big 4, universal health care, affordable housing, manufacturing, and food security. Again, a perfect alignment, you know, which is focusing on improving the lives of people, on growing productivity, on increasing dignity, you know, of the people. But also, if you have a healthy population, most likely you will have more money to invest in other areas. You're most likely going to have a population that is more healthy and therefore more productive, you know. If we talk about connectivity, ICT, we are a country that is probably on the cutting edge in terms of ICT innovation and progress. So again, really the visions of both President Xi Jinping align very, very well with the vision of President Kenyatta. And that is why we were among the founders of the BRI, because we believe in that vision, and we see that it is going to help us achieve our own vision, as well as the vision of development in the East and Central Africa region.
The Chinese ambassador to Cote d'Ivoire tells us about new opportunities for cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative on the African continent, particularly in Cote d'Ivoire.
There are many new opportunities under the Belt and Road Initiative. We will strengthen cooperation in Africa to realize major infrastructure projects in the telecommunication, energy, and transportation sectors. More concretely, as far as Cote d'Ivoire is concerned, we will continue to implement several projects, including in the sports, education, and aviation sectors. We will continue to work closely with the Ivorian authorities on exploring future prospects.
Je pense que ce deuxième forum serait donc dans la continuité.
I think this second forum will be a continuation of the strengthening of the Africa-China axis. African countries are already making huge gains with China, and the number are confirming it. Today, trade between Africa and China is about $148 billion, while trade between Africa and the United States is about $51 billion. This means that the trade volume between Africa and China is 3 times the volume of trade between Africa and the United States. I think it is a dynamic that is already established between China and Africa, and this second forum only reinforces this dynamic.
Ça viendrait renforcer
China's One Belt, One Road initiative has provided a framework for cooperation with numerous countries in the continent. China and Zimbabwe's cooperation in recent years has seen large projects such as agriculture, mining, finance, infrastructure, and construction deepen bilateral ties between the two countries. Zimbabwe's government says that it will work to deepen bilateral cooperation with China through the initiatives identified under the Forum of China-Africa Cooperation Framework, as well as the Belt and Road Initiative.
Looking forward that under the framework of Belt and Road Initiative and FOCA, China and Zimbabwe will tap into more possibilities of practical cooperation. We also encourage more Chinese enterprises to come to Zimbabwe and to make investments.
6 years on, what is the state of the Belt and Road? And how is the progress?
Where are the challenges? Who is building, connecting, and benefiting?
Our global correspondents bring you personal insights, live business reports,
interviews with the major players, investigation and analysis.
For comprehensive coverage of the Belt and Road Forum, stay tuned to CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up, WHO halts Ebola intervention in DR Congo affected areas due to insecurity. And South Africa's local and global heroes recognized in annual national honors.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them.
In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara.
No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the World Health Organization has announced that it's temporarily halting Ebola prevention activities in some areas in eastern regions. The decision follows an escalation of attacks on medical teams by armed groups. The global health body says it will resume services after security measures are reinforced. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The eastern Congolese town of Katwa and Butembo City are the areas where the Ebola response activities have been temporarily suspended. The suspension follows an increase in attacks on treatment centers. Last week, armed assailants attacked a hospital in Butembo and shot dead a Cameroonian doctor working with the World Health Organization. The Congolese government and the international community condemned the killing of Dr. Richard Mozoku. The World Health Organization says it's working with the DRC government and the UN to strengthen the protection of patients and health workers in the Ebola-affected areas. Their prevention efforts have been seriously affected by the existence of armed groups in the areas. The officials also plan to step up their community outreach activities in order to change the minds of some locals who believe Ebola was brought by foreigners. In February this year, medical charity Doctors Without Borders suspended its activities in Butembo and Katwa after an attack on treatment centers. The DRC Health Ministry says 890 people have died of Ebola since August last year. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
To South Africa now, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has conferred the 2019 National Orders Awards to those who have made outstanding contributions to the country and global community. The awards are bestowed on distinguished local citizens and eminent foreign nationals who have played a big role in building a free and peaceful democratic South Africa. CGTN's Olisan Jamela has more.
The National Orders are the highest awards that South Africa bestows on citizens and members of the international community. They are a recognition of the many outstanding individuals who defied odds to make an immense contribution in various spheres of life. Also, an expression of gratitude to the international community who aided those in exile in the fight against apartheid.
The national orders are the highest honor that this country can bestow on its citizens and also eminent foreign nationals. Although they are conferred by the President, the recipients are nominated by members of the public. These orders celebrate individuals who have excelled, whose actions and works represent the triumph of what we can call the human spirit. They are men and women driven by purpose and service.
Distinguished South Africans and eminent foreign nationals were honored at the ceremony.
It is fitting that we recognize also the contribution of eminent foreign nationals who contributed to the achievement and advancement of our freedom.
Well-known South Africans such as Yvonne Chaka Chaka were amongst those bestowed with an award. Chaka Chaka was awarded for her excellent contribution to the field of music and her general contribution to social cohesion.
I feel very honored, very humbled to have received the highest honor from the President of South Africa. Yes, I am a citizen of the world, but I regard myself as a South African first.
Johan Musaval was the first black South African to become a senior principal dancer at the Royal Ballet, the highest rank in the profession, at one of the world's most prestigious classical ballet centers. He was also honored by the President.
Never in my wildest dream did I ever think that I would come this far in my life. You know, I have done everything possible to put South Africa on the map where the arts are concerned. And all through my life, wherever I dance, in every country in the world, I represented South Africa. And South Africa is known all over the world. This is Mandela country.
Some of the recipients included greats in the fields of arts, sports, journalism, and academia. The national orders also recognized individuals who have contributed to a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa as envisaged in our constitution. President Ramaphosa said it was fitting to hold the ceremony to thank those who had faithfully discharged their duty to their communities, to their fellow citizens, and to their country. Yolison Jamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
And Rama now joins us with the day's business news.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in business. Nigeria wants to double its oil output and triple refining capacity in the next 6 years. Can it pull it off? And we'll bring you South Africa's long-awaited provisional report on the cost of data.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor
to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market.
It's colorful,
vibrant and exotic.
CGTN stands at the gateway
to Europe, Africa and the Middle East.
From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
All right, then let's start with a variation of a pledge we've heard before on this program. Nigeria says it wants to double oil production and triple refining capacity, but this time within 6 years. The OPEC member, who also happens to be Africa's largest single oil producer, is looking to pump 4 million barrels of crude a day and to increase its refining capacity to 1.5 million barrels of crude a day. Now, the country has been grappling with militant attacks, leakages from existing infrastructure and theft at oil installations, and all of that combined has stagnated growth in the oil sector. It's also looking to be self-sufficient in its fuel demand as it cuts imports that often put a strain on its foreign currency reserves. Moreover, refineries in the country are struggling to utilize a combined 445,000 barrels a day of capacity due to neglect and mismanagement. Substantive transformation in South Africa's fishing sector is still a challenge, and it's one that requires collective responsibility and action. The country's Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries Ministry has presented its 2020 draft general policy. This comes as the country is looking to transform as well as strike a fair balance as far as resource sharing is concerned among those involved in the sector. CGTN's Travis Andrews has the details.
South Africa has a coastline of 3,000 kilometers with more than 22 commercial fisheries as well as a number of non-commercial and small-scale subsistence fisheries. And all of them have come to argue their cases to the Fisheries Department for their 2020 rights allocations, which will allow them to legally fish for the country's living marine resources. This process will determine not only who gets what and in which sector, but just how much and for how long, which is a process where much has to be determined.
We're about to embark on a new rights allocation process in 12 fishing sectors, and we are reviewing the policy that guides that rights allocation process, and we're consulting with stakeholders around their views on how we can improve the rights allocation process to get that balancing act correct.
The fishing sector is varied, but is dominated by a few lucrative longline deep-sea fisheries, which largely fall to commercial interests, who export around $500 million to the overseas market, or half of its catch. The other half goes to the local market, with 144,000 tons of hake being caught in the Western Cape alone. Securing a decent quota has become critical to the local industry.
This is our second round of long-term rights that we're going through now, and we envisage that this next period will grow extensively, both in our fleet, our capacity, and our product supply in the world.
High-value species such as West Coast rock lobster is a fishery that's already 98% overfished, and for 2020, some in the small-scale fishing sector plan to diversify their interests.
We're trying to increase our current quota that we have, so just to be less reliant on the lobster sector, and basically to make sure that sector can grow, and then basically diversify back to lobster again. So our strategy at the moment is to focus more on longline and basically to make it as efficient as possible.
Of course, one of the most important issues of distributing quotas in a fair and equitable manner is also job creation. And with 27,000 people employed in the commercial sector alone, it will be an important issue that the Department of Fisheries will have to consider for 2020. The department says they'll likely take a similar path to previous rights allocations in order to avoid being hauled to court by disgruntled applicants, which could take unnecessary time and lengthen the already contentious process. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Still in South Africa, the Competition Commission over there has released its long-awaited provisional report into the country's cost of data. In short, the Commission says South African data providers are exploiting the poor. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola with the details.
The report focused on the two dominant players. The authorities' research found that South African consumers are charged up to 6 times more for data than their continental peers.
The idea of the Digital New Deal is to ensure that we have lower prices for consumers and greater access, and that requires pricing behavior change by the major mobile operators. It requires the state to bring a greater level of spectrum available in the industry, and it requires regulators to monitor on a more consistent basis the behavior of firms to ensure that they are consistent with both the law but also to competitive outcomes.
The public hearings highlighted several issues, and it appears this drove Vodacom and MTN to drop some of their prices on data bundles.
Operators accept that headline prices are not ideal. We need to change that gap. And even under pressure from ICASA recently around the end user subscriber charter, that there have been positive moves to drop out of bundle rates from the two largest operators. And that's where I think, as I said, the Minister has put it maybe very well, as it's some sort of digital deal. The initial drop doesn't necessarily hurt revenues, but it brings about a more competitive process going forward. And the drop to low-income subscribers, I think, addresses something that really is socially indefensible, and we can't, in a sense, have persist in it.
The competition authorities have given the mobile network operators 6 weeks to evaluate the provisional report and make suggestions and comment on the proposals. There won't be any enforcement action yet.
We have punitive measures. We do have. We think that that's not the preferred route. But we have said in the report that if there is no action, in other words, there's really no meaningful engagement with these recommendations, then we have no option but to invoke all of these other measures.
The Competition Commissioner is using a carrot and stick approach. The carrot is spectrum and the stick is the new revised Competition Act. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Tshwane, South Africa.
Let's move on to Ghana now. It's launched the world's largest medical drone delivery service. It's going to be operating 24 hours a day from 4 distribution hubs. Each of those is home to 30 UAVs. They will be delivering to over 2,000 health facilities, serving some 12 million people across the country. With the details, here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai.
At the newly established Medical Drone Delivery Center in Omenako in eastern Ghana, blood is being packaged. The blood will be transported to a remote hospital.
Our focus as a government is to ensure that the health needs of the Ghanaian people are better served. In this 21st century, no Ghanaian deserves to die for lack of blood. No Ghanaian deserves to die because medicine needed is not readily available at the health facility he or she has been rushed to during an emergency.
The launch of the Medical Drone Technology Center in Ghana makes it the largest vaccine drone delivery in the world. The government says corporate institutions are funding the $12 million medical drone technology project. This drone technology service is expected to increase healthcare access to more than 14 million people in Ghana. At least 148 life-saving and essential medical supplies, including emergency blood, will be in stock at the distribution centers. And over 2,000 health facilities across Ghana are to benefit from the medical drone services.
We'll have 4 distribution centers here in Ghana. Each distribution center will have 30 drones, collectively capable of making 600 flights a day.
Ghana's Medical Association has, however, opposed this new technology. It says the money should instead be spent adding staff and ambulances to the country's healthcare sector. But the government says technology must be harnessed to change the face of healthcare delivery and save lives. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, Eastern Region, Ghana.
I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour though. We'll be assessing the damage so far that has been caused by Cyclone Kenneth in Mozambique and in Tanzania as well. Of course, it did make landfall barely 24 hours ago. What has happened since then? We'll have some answers for you live at 1800 GMT on Global Business Africa. See you then. For now though, back to Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead. South African artist creates her narrative through perceptive visual aesthetic.
Join us from Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Johannesburg, the Art Eye Gallery focuses on creating platforms for emerging and established artists to gain exposure and create sustainable visual art careers. One such artist is Phumzile Buthelezi. She is an emerging artist whose perceptible visual aesthetic has set her work apart. As CGTN's Ulysses Jamela reports, Buthelezi is creating her own visual narrative.
The Art Eye Gallery is a commercial art space that promotes the production and exposure of emerging African artists around the world. The gallery focuses on being a platform for great expression and storytelling. By celebrating the uniqueness of every artist, the gallery aims to help them reach their full capabilities by giving them the freedom in space and material. Phumzile Buthelezi is one of the artists who has been afforded space here.
You see, someone like Phumzile, she's a very, very strong artist. And we saw that she's got a very strong message to showcase or to tell around the world. So us taking in Phumzile, it's very difficult for female South African artists or female African artists to be recognized. What we're trying to do, or our main aim is to sustain her and develop her to be an artist, not just only a female artist, but an artist that will be recognized around the world.
Buthelezi has been a crafter for as long as she can remember, and that's because both her parents were talented crafters. As a result, her printing plates and sculptural work are usually a combination of both art and craft.
I had no idea I was an artist. It actually took me into my adult life before I could actually find out that I am an artist. But most of the time I was a crafter.
The artist tells us that she's inspired by culture, tradition, and life in general. Her love for art was given space during her first year of studying printmaking. Buthelezi loves experimenting and exploring with different materials because she's stimulated by textures.
I'm always that person who tries to do things differently. So when everybody would buy normal plates to work on, I would take whatever that they've thrown away and I remake it or do something out of it.
Over the years, Buthelezi has developed a diverse sensibility, rendering works in a number of different mediums. Working from here at the Art Eye Gallery is key for her.
Working with Art Eye has helped me has given me that freedom to at least, try and break those boundaries, and to be able to fuse what I do together, because in my work, I fuse art and craft. I mean, I don't see why they are separated, but that's what I do, I try and do that.
Her current artworks, amazing and complex collages made from recycled paper and reject prints. Ulysses Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And ahead in sports. Caster Semenya dominates the 5,000 meters race in the South African Athletics Championships.
Africa, where champions are made